The Federal Dream Act is dead. On the other hand, one presidential candidate says we should just throw out the 14th Amendment to get rid of anchor babies. Clearly, our immigration system is dysfunctional and in need of reform. Fortunately, Professor of Immigration Law Noah Novogrodsky was on hand to discuss some of the issues. I'd like you to define what the DREAM Act is or was, and then maybe what the deferred action for childhood arrivals is.
Sure. So the DREAM Act is or was a piece of failed legislation. It was a bill that would try to regularize some of the millions of undocumented people who are in the country, mainly children and young adults whose parents brought them here as undocumented citizens, but who went through our school system, who consider themselves American, and who are anxious to contribute to the economy and society at large. The DREAM Act failed because lots of bills fail in our dysfunctional Congress, and has been unable to be resurrected through a large enough coalition of Republicans and Democrats to get to the president's desk. So what President Obama did several years ago was something called DACA, the Deferred Action, and it means that if children, young people, have been here for many years, have no criminal record, are part of the fabric of our communities, that they get a deferral from the threat of deportation or removal from the country. And with that status, they can come out of the shadows and get specific employment authorization and in some circumstances get driver's licenses. Many of them are attending universities, including the University of Wyoming, and the idea is to welcome people who are in everything except legal status Americans within our community. There's also a sense in which these young people are here for no fault of their own. They didn't plan some run over the border or engage in any kind of knowingly illegal activity. They came here and with parents who were probably undocumented, and many are part of mixed family, mixed status families. So some people in the family are here legally, are permanent residents or citizens, and others are here illegally, and they've been attending school. They are the captain of the debate team, the star of the soccer team, our best and brightest, educated at taxpayer expenses. And then the question is, do we really want to deport them, or can we find a way to welcome them into our community?
On the other hand, I'm going to bring up a contrast very early in our talk, and that is, well, you look at some of the things that candidate Trump has been saying: do away with the 14th Amendment, his plan to deport the 12 to 14 undocumented immigrants in a year and a half. Are these things feasible according to the way our system is supposed to work?
Right. So in a word, no, as to both parts of your question. The 14th Amendment is a constitutional amendment which gave former slaves citizenship rights in this country like every other U.S. citizen, and it is a form of birthright citizenship that is enshrined in the Constitution. So if you want to get rid of the 14th Amendment, you have to amend the Constitution, and that is not easy to do, and it is designed to be difficult. So saying that a presidential candidate is going to repeal the 14th Amendment is probably a lot of hot air. In terms of deporting 12 to 14 or 11 million people, that's impractical, but not legally impossible. It would take a tremendous amount of resources that we probably want to spend elsewhere to round up that number of people and send them back to their countries of origin. Who are these people? They run the spectrum from so-called dreamers, the young people who are the beneficiaries of deferred action, to their parents, many of whom are equally integrated into our communities and now have U.S. citizen grandchildren or are the breadwinners for many U.S. citizens. Remember, if somebody comes here from another country and has a baby here, their child is a U.S. citizen. So if you deport the parents with dependent children, you are effectively separating families and you are de facto deporting U.S. citizens because the children are going to go with the parents. So as a matter of law, policy, and sort of economic priorities, it seems to me to be very unwise to promise a mass deportation campaign. At the same time, the Obama administration and the Bush administration before it are deporting large numbers of people. And there's a backlash on the left to the number of people who are being deported. So progressives and liberals call President Obama the deporter-in-chief. And he has ordered the Department of Homeland Security to remove upwards of 400,000 people a year. This is widespread removal. Hopefully, DHS is removing violent criminals, people who pose a threat to the community, and not folks who get pulled over for a taillight being out and their status as undocumented is discovered. But if you go from deporting 400,000 people to deporting 13 million people, you are now going to sweep up all sorts of people who are loved, treasured, and valued in our communities. And I think there will be a tremendous backlash. And I don't think anybody wants to spend the billions of dollars that would be necessary to do just that.
Like many other challenges facing the United States, is immigration reform just going to be in limbo at a standstill for the next couple decades?
I hope not, but we're certainly stuck right now. And Republican and Democratic administrations alike in recent years have been unable to advance this issue. We have some interesting precedent coming from Wyoming that might be instructive. So Senator Simpson led the charge towards immigration reform in the 1986 Act. That did provide amnesty for some people who were here illegally. It set new targets. It was an attempt to reset the whole immigration conversation. And Senator Simpson is proudly responsible for that accomplishment. Wyoming is not a border state, and we've traditionally had low unemployment. We also have an aging population, and sometimes it's hard to get, say, skilled nurses to come to Sheridan to work during long winters and absent other kind of inducement programs. So Wyoming could be a laboratory for reform. We do not face the same pressures that, say, an Arizona faces in terms of border security, in terms of knowing or not knowing how many young people are going to enroll in schools, or the pressures on the public health system. So Wyoming is low population, largely rural state, and certain parts of our economy rely on immigrant labor. And if we could reform our immigration system to help match up the people who want jobs with the employers who need labor in Wyoming, we could be a voice of sanity on this debate, just as we were 30 years ago. But I'm not holding my breath that the current Congress is going to figure out a path to reform. And part of this is because we're in a perpetual election cycle, and it's difficult to break out of the primary politics that tend to drive more extreme positions on this issue. And this is not a Democrat-Republican divide necessarily. So there's a lot of fault for a broken system to go around, and it is shared among lots of political interests.
Thanks, Noah.
Thank you for having me.